We turn now to some of the bigger political perils that are facing Democrats heading into November. It's not just an uphill fight to hold the White House, but also the Senate, where they hold a razor-thin 51-49 majority. The map, it is brutal, simply put, for Democrats. Of the 34 Senate races that take place this year, 23 of them, two-thirds of them, are in seats that are held by Democrats. That includes the seat being vacated by Debbie Stabenow. She, of course, is from the battleground of Michigan. She is not seeking re-election. Joe Manchin is from deep red West Virginia. He is also not running for Senate again. Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey, meanwhile, is seeking a fourth term in the state that went for Joe Biden 4 years ago, turned a red Senate seat blue 2 years ago. But 2024 may pose the toughest challenge yet for the moderate Democrat. NBC News correspondent Ali Vitali joined Senator Casey on the campaign trail, and she shared this report.
That's the sound of one of the most consequential re-election battles in the country.
So I think when that message is delivered, we're going to advance the ball a good bit.
And today, Senator Bob Casey is getting a little help from his friend.
It must be nice to be on the campaign trail when you don't have to be the candidate.
Yeah, lower pressure. Right here in Pennsylvania, this is ground zero for control of the United States Senate in a tough race. This isn't like a race like Bob has had before.
Tell me why this race is different than all your other races.
Well, I think probably because of the scale of the money on the other side.
Okay.
I mean, I've got an opponent he's worth a couple $100 million.
Yeah.
He's raised a lot of money already. That alone changes it.
Yeah. Cash talks.
That opponent trying to unseat the three-term Senator Casey, Republican Dave McCormick, who lost the 2022 Senate primary to Dr. Oz.
Together we will defeat Bob Casey.
And once again, voters in battleground Pennsylvania will be key in determining which party controls the Senate and the White House.
I wonder if you could give President Biden a grade for how he's done as he heads into re-election.
I don't want to give him a letter grade. What I do want to say is I think he's someone who has the basic integrity you'd want in a public official. He's tried, I think, working with people in both parties to get things done.
How much is Trump a factor here, though?
I don't know. It's really difficult to assess that.
It's early days out here on the trail with Casey in Philadelphia, but voters have their minds on November and the possibility of a Biden-Trump rematch.
I'm very much concerned about saving our country.
Yep.
And not having an autocracy or a dictator for president.
There is this stampede of Trump, and yourself and other senators across the country, we don't hear you talking about Biden. It's all about Trump.
But Casey's more eager to talk policy than presidential personalities.
They're the party that's against the advancement of voting rights. They're the party that wants to get rid of the infrastructure bill.
Campaigning on Democratic accomplishments and priorities.
The other thing I think about as a key issue is reproductive rights. Can you talk about your evolution on that?
I have never supported and will never support the Republican effort to ban abortions.
Would you support a ceasefire?
No. And here's why. Because, in fact, I think those who, and I've had protesters as well, those who have been calling for a ceasefire should start with Hamas.
Early polls here show Casey with a lead, but it's a long way to November.
It'll be a close, tough race. But look, a lot's on the line. Every time I've run for public office in Pennsylvania, I've had to earn the vote and the trust of the people. And I'm going to do that again.
Part of Ali Vitali's conversation with the senator from Pennsylvania, Bob Casey, and Ali joins us now, as you see. Talk to us, Ali, a little bit. That was an interesting conversation. I was struck by one of the people in the crowd there, one of the black men who was speaking to Casey, basically saying, all y'all talk about is Donald Trump. It's a parade of criticism of Donald Trump, not as much about Joe Biden. That's another issue to get to. But how much does Casey rely on being a moderate in this campaign in that state?
Well, I was struck by the same thing, Peter, frankly. You walk into those rooms oftentimes on the campaign trail and you don't know what's going to be on the minds of voters. But in that room, it was so clear that they were very heavily concerned about election integrity. They were concerned about the way that Democrats are messaging out on the campaign trail. And certainly that's one of the things that they were asking of Senator Casey and his friend, Senator Mark Kelly, who was campaigning there with him, saying, can you talk about Joe Biden? And really, can you talk about the policy? Can you talk about the achievements? Something that Bob Casey was only too happy to do with them. He spent a lot of time talking about the things that, frankly, a more moderate Democrat would talk about on the campaign trail, and frankly, issues that they're going to need to be successful on if they're going to hold this seat and hold on to a lot of the other seats that they're playing defense on as well. Casey talked about the infrastructure bill that was negotiated and delivered in bipartisan fashion. He talked about the things that are needed to be done to shore up reproductive health access. All of those are key issues that are going to be at play in 2024 writ large, especially in the presidential. But Casey, again, is focused on his race. He knows the presidential is going to be happening concurrently, and very much so making the campaign trail crowded in Pennsylvania. But he was focused on himself, his individual policies, and what he has been able to deliver for Pennsylvania over the course of his last 3 terms.
And one reason that conversation was particularly interesting, especially as it relates to Pennsylvania and frankly around the country, is because the African-American, the black population in this country, which has been a strong supporter of Democrats, of Joe Biden, is a group among whom you're starting to see a little bit of erosion, certainly black men in particular, not as much black women, but black men in their support for Joe Biden, perhaps for Democrats. So that really is a population that the Democrats and Bob Casey clearly recognizes they need to motivate, and not just motivate, but demonstrate what they have got done and why they are the best party to get it done going forward.
Yeah, Peter, especially in a place like Philadelphia and those areas where they really do need to see high turnout of black voters. That's something that you and I know so well. We watched in 2020 as it took days to figure out what the election results were going to be in Pennsylvania. Everything hinged on that. Now you got to imagine a redux of 2020 with the presidential contest, layered on top of that a hot Senate contest that could decide control of the Senate chamber. All of that is huge. But one other thing that struck me from my conversation with Senator Casey was Pennsylvania also provided us some insight into the ways that Donald Trump's big lie about the 2020 election was manifesting at the state level. We saw someone like Doug Mastriano actually on the ballot for Republicans in the gubernatorial race in 2020. It all begged the question that I asked Senator Casey, which is, do you have concerns about what Republicans might do, saying that they won in this election, whether or not they did or not? He said yes, he had those concerns too, Peter.
Yeah, good conversation with Casey and good analysis from on the ground. Allie, we're grateful for you being here. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.